It's really a delight to welcome David Baldacci to back to PNP. He's not only one of the writing world's great success stories, but a greater Washington area success story as well, if you count Virginia as part of the greater Washington area. He grew up in Richmond and went to college and law school in Virginia before coming to Washington D.C. to practice law for 9 or 10 years, and then hit it big nearly 20 years ago with his first novel, Absolute Power, and hasn't looked back. His latest book, The Guilty, is his 30th adult. Yeah, I know. Let's all gasp here. His 30th adult novel, all bestsellers, and he's also done in his free time 5 novels for younger readers. It was only a couple of years ago that David first spoke here at PNP, but he was back last year and now this, and at the rate he turns out books, his appearances here could become at least annual, if not twice a year. I think next year he's due to come out with 2 books. And by the way, David was here on that last Saturday, a year ago, around this time, on that Saturday after Thanksgiving, when President Obama came. And he got to meet David got to meet the president. I'm sure that was a high point, right? High point of the year. Anyway, The Guilty sees the return for the 4th time of government assassin Will Robie, but much of the story takes you back to Robie's past. All you Robie fans out there know that from the beginning, David has sought to humanize this character, to show that he's not a cold-hearted killer. And here we see Robie experiencing, I guess you could call it, killer's block. He's unable early on to pull the trigger, and this leads him to confront his past and basically to show that often to go forward, it's important to deal with any issues that may have been left unresolved years earlier. Now, in addition to being a best-selling author, David and his wife, Michelle, established a nonprofit organization, the Wish You Well Foundation, which is dedicated to improving literacy rates in the United States. And tonight we're collecting new and lightly used books to be used in the foundation's programming. So if you'd like to donate a book, please leave it in this white box, which will be up at the cash registers after this evening's talk. So with that, please join me in welcoming David Baldacci.
Yeah, I had forgotten about rush hour. When I saw the driver was going on, the worst bottleneck that I've found in the area is the 267 toll road to where you get on 495 North. And whoever designed that, I'm going to have killed one day. I might have to send Robie out after him, after he gets his head straight, because it's like, I don't know what person in their right mind would have designed the road. But you come off, you have this huge curve, you have like 7 lanes coming into 1 lane, and it's just a disaster. So it only took us, once we get past there, I live like 3 miles from there, so it took us about an hour and a half to get to that point. And then after that, we got here fairly speedily. So, but I apologize for being late. I hate being late. I guess it's being a trial lawyer. You don't want to be late for the judge. But I appreciate your patience. It was incredible when President Obama came here, and I was here for Small Business Saturday and got to meet him. And I had just written an article for the New York Times, and the article had, one of the things I wrote about was, what book would you recommend the president reading? So I said, hey, I just wrote this article for the Times. He goes, what book did you think I should read? And I said, well, I know you've already read it. It's called Everything I Needed to Know I Learned in Kindergarten. And I said, your problem is that most of the people you have to deal with, either one, haven't read it, or if they did read it, they've forgotten the contents of it. And he goes, you're right. He goes, got to learn to play nice in the sandbox. And I said, absolutely, yes. So that was a very cool moment. This box, the Wish You Well Foundation, we partnered about 6 years ago with Feeding America, which runs all the nation's food banks, including the one here in the D.C. area. And so in my book tours across the country, we send out these white boxes ahead of time. People put in new and gently used books. Once a box is full, and we pay to have it shipped to a local area food bank. So when you think about it, illiteracy and poverty go hand in hand. So people seeking food assistance, many of them have low literacy skills, low reading skills, and thus they have low job prospects. And they need food to survive, obviously, but that alone can't break them out of the cycle of poverty. So getting books into the hands of people who may have not ever had a book of their own, and in books into homes that may never have had a lot of books there, and also homes and books into the hands of kids, you sort of break that generational cycle of poverty. And over the last 6 years, we have collected and donated about 1.5 million books to food banks across the United States. And let me tell you, it has made a big difference. The food banks love it, and their patrons love it. So if you have some books you want to put in the box, it'll go to a really, really good place. Will Robie and The Guilty. This is the 4th installment, and as it was said in the introduction, this is a little bit different landscape for Robie. He goes out on an assignment, and he kills his target, but he inadvertently kills an innocent person as well. And it's sort of cavalierly classified as collateral damage, but he doesn't accept it as that. And at the same time, he learns that his father, who he hasn't seen in 22 years, they've been estranged, has been arrested for murder and is being held in a jail in Mississippi, the small town where Robie grew up. And at that point, Robie doesn't care because he has no relationship with his father. But when he goes back out into the field to make sure that he can still do his job, he finds out that he can't do his job. He can't pull the trigger. Something is really messed up in his head. I like writing about universal themes, and I think that most of us probably have some unresolved business in the past. I won't ask for a show of hands. But many of us do, and we think, well, okay, we'll sweep it under the rug and we'll deal with it later. And the funny thing is, time goes by, the years go by, but it's curious, that little lump under the rug as time goes by tends to get bigger and bigger. So when you're actually trying to move forward in your life, you tend to trip over it, and you can't move forward, and all of a sudden you have to realize, well, I've got to go back in my past and kind of deal with this. And that's Robie's dilemma. So he has to go back to the place he's never wanted to go back to before, Cantrell, Mississippi. I made the town up. There is not a Cantrell, Mississippi. I always check for that. To confront the one person he's never wanted to ever see again, that's his own father. And it's true. To write a series about an assassin, you do have to find something beyond his sort of skill to kill people, because otherwise I'm not really sure you're going to hang with this guy for multiple books. So my job as a writer was to try to find the flesh and blood underneath the killing machine, if you will. And I tried to do that in a variety of ways, showing that he has a conscience. He thinks about these things. He doesn't just go out and pull the trigger and then forget about it. Human beings are not naturally inclined to do that sort of thing unless you're like a Ted Bundy and you were born without an extra chromosome you needed to show remorse to people. So Robie, every time he pulls a trigger, it adds a little bit of baggage to him. It takes a little piece of himself away as well. And he knows that. And he knows that at some point he's not going to be able to do this anymore. So for him to have to go back and confront his past is sort of another albatross around his neck. He doesn't want to do it, but he knows that he has to. And this was a way, two things. One, to sort of humanize him even further. And secondly, to show his past, where he came from. And I know probably a lot of readers want to know, where did this guy come from? And I dealt with Jessica Reel's past, and she is in The Guilty as well, in the last book, The Target. So you got to know her past, where she came from, and some of her demons. And in The Guilty, you're going to be able to do the same thing with Will Robie. So what's going on with me? I've got another book coming out next spring. It's called The Last Mile. And it's a sequel to Memory Man. So Amos Decker will be back in a new book, and had a lot of fun writing that one. He's a fascinating character. I mean, even though he's unlike any character I've ever developed before, because I've never really sat down and thought, here's my next hero, a really big, obese guy who can't relate to people. That should do it. I'm sure he'll be very popular, and people will like him. Well, it turned out people did really like Memory Man, but I really liked Amos Decker. And writing this book, I seem to be able to channel him for whatever reason more easily than I can any other character that I've written about. His dialogue and his mannerisms and his thought processes seem to just sort of pop out. The fact that, he has an amazing memory because of a brain trauma, and the fact that I can really channel him really well, I'm not sure what that says about me. But We'll see how it goes. I'm beginning to write the next book for the fall. I do have a pretty busy schedule, and I try to keep hitting my marks. It'll probably be another John Puller, so it'll be a sequel to The Escape that came out last fall. I really like the Puller character as well. That's one we're developing for network television, and that I have 3 television projects right now in development and 1 feature film, John Puller television series, a book I wrote years ago, actually based in D.C., and one of the characters loosely based on Chief Kathy Lanier. It's called True Blue. Is in development for a television series as well. And then an original series at a company, a very large independent international production company came to me about 3 months ago and said, we'd like you to create a new television series for us. Not based on any of your books, just something you would come up with. And so while we were negotiating the deal, my agents were negotiating the deal, I got interested in the project, and I sat down and wrote it. And it's a 40-page treatment that gives a 3-year story arc, all the major characters, and plus the first pilot episode. And so when we signed the deal, like 5 minutes after we signed the deal, I sent them the treatment. And they were like, damn, you're fast. How did that happen? But so they loved it, and I did my little note session, and so that's seems like that's on a fast track, actually, so that will be kind of cool. The Finisher is my young adult series. I've written 2 of those, The Finisher and The Keeper. The third one I'm about halfway through now. That's one is in development for feature film with Sony Columbia. And I was actually in London in September on book tour, and met with a screenwriter who lives in London, and had a really good chat. And I've read both drafts of the script and really pleased with how she's attacked it and overcome the challenges of taking a 500-page novel and turning it into about a 100-page shooting script, which is really difficult to do. I've had to adapt some of my own work, and it's not easy to do because basically you have to decide, what do I cut? Which characters do I have to pare down, and what subplots that made the book really interesting do I have to completely get rid of, which is very hard to do, but you have to be brutal about it, and that's why I don't adapt too many of my books for film. I'd rather let somebody else do that, but she's done a terrific job. Sony is really happy with the script, and so that one's moving forward as well. So that's really, all I got going, other than the holidays coming up. I'm looking forward, I'm sure, to Thanksgiving. I'm sure many of you are too, and I can't believe Christmas is almost here. It seems kind of unreal. But so this is my last event in the D.C. area, which is great. Politics and Prose is just a tremendous place, and I love this bookstore and frequented it when I was working down in D.C. And independents are thriving now, really good independents like you guys are. And people say, you think bookstores are going away? And I said, no, I don't think I think they're more important than they've ever been right now. I'll tell you this little story. And I was in London, and you'll get a kick out of this. I was in London, and my British publisher wanted me to go over and do my little, routine for Amazon books in London at their big office in London. And their managing director just come from Seattle and moved to London, and so I did my little thing and made everybody happy and laugh, and they had like refreshments afterwards, and he came over to me, and he looked just like Jeff Bezos, who's sort of he's a CEO, and I was like, no, it's not him, but it looks like him. I wonder if that's a requirement when you're hired by Amazon, you have to look like him. And he said, David, it's we've got all this great stuff going on, but the one thing we've never been able to duplicate, and I'll give you an example. When we, you go into a bookstore, and there's a knowledgeable person there, and they lead you around the store and all the shelves, maybe you and your kids, and they help you discover great books. That's something we have never been able to do on the website. Can you think of a way for us to be able to do that on the website? And I looked at it, and in all sincerity, and I said, I have no idea how you could possibly ever do that, nor should you really want to do that, because that's what bookstores do really well. What Amazon does, they do really well. They're an innovative company. It's just they built a behemoth, but there's a place for everybody in this industry, and the independent bookstores in particular are where new writers and new voices are discovered. These are the people that hand sell books like nobody else can, not even the Amazons of the world. And this is where careers are created, and where existing careers thrive and can build. And so that's why independent bookstores are necessary for what we are as a society. And that's why I always want to support them. Virtually every one of my bookstore stops on this tour are independents. I have 4 more stops, all in Florida. And I'm at the stage in my career, my publishers are like, where do you want to go? you know? I was like, December. How about Florida? So, but they're all independent bookstores in Florida. I'm looking forward to that last segment, and then get to go home and spend some time with the family for holidays. You know, my kids are all both grown now, which is so weird to me. It's because forever they were just little. You know, I'm sure everybody here who has kids can understand that. And I always was told when I was a young dad that don't blink, because they'll be grown and gone. And back then, you know, when you were with them like 24/7 and they were up in the middle of the night and you were like so tired and you were like, no way, you know, look, I'm blinking right now. They're still here. But it does happen. Somebody asked me once, is it easy to write for kids and, you know, with the young adult series? And my answer is very sincere and heartfelt. I said, you write down to kids at your peril. Kids are way too smart and sophisticated these days. And what thrilled kids 20 years ago, 10 years ago, doesn't thrill kids today. And I'll give you an example. When I was a teenager, I went to a movie you probably heard of called Jaws. And Jaws terrified the entire nation, maybe the world, for a really long time. And I remember sitting in the theater and watching it, and when that head popped out of the porthole of the sunken boat, everybody in the theater wet their pants. You know, me included. I freely admit that. And for the next 10 years, not only did I not go in the ocean, I didn't bathe. And I was pretty sure the shark was going to come out of the pipe any second, you know. And don't get me going on Sharknado. I'm not even going to go there. So this is a movie that literally traumatized me. So fast forward a number of years later, I'm a young dad. I got 2 little kids. My daughter was 6. My son was maybe 4. And I come down one morning to find out that my daughter has found Jaws on the cable station. And so I see the Jaws. I was like, oh my God. So I'm running down the stairs. My goal is to throw myself in front of the television to block them from being traumatized like I was when I was much older than they were at that point. Until I realized 2 things. One, my 4-year-old son was on the floor laughing his butt off. And my daughter's holding a remote looking at the television going, that's the stupidest, fakest shark I've ever seen. And that was like an epiphany for me. I was like, oh my God, you know, what thrills kids? No, well, so bring your A game for that. But I'm prolific, I think, for one reason only, is because I love to write. And I can't remember a day in the last 35 years of my life where I didn't write something. Not a single day, or at least think about it. I never did it as a job. I never did it really for any goal of making any money. I mean, I spent the first 15 years of my writing career writing short stories and trying to get those published. Never had a thought to writing a novel for many years. And you can't make a living selling short stories in this country, by the way. Even when you did sell a short story, they didn't give you a check, because magazines are really cheap, you know. So they give you like 5 free copies of the magazine. Look at your byline. By you. I was like, well, yeah, but the celluloid is not edible. So, you know, so that's really why I went to law school and became a lawyer, to support myself. And I had a family back then too. So, but I just love it. You know, and I think you have to love it. Otherwise, it's really too frustrating and maddening, and you know, it just can age you really quickly when days are not going well. But if you love it, it's a great way to spend your time. Now, anybody have any questions? I'd love to take some questions, and then we'll get you signed and out here.
Make your way to one of the microphones, either over there or over there.
Hi. I was just wondering, anything in the horizon for the Camel Club?
I probably, since the last Camel Club book came out, I probably had, 500 bookstore events like this. And the string is now unbroken. Every single one. I've always had somebody stand up and say, hey, how about the Camel Club? Great question. 2 years ago, I was in Atlanta, and I walked in the bookstore, and there was a guy sitting in the crowd, and all of a sudden, he sees me walk by, and he jumps up. He has a staff, like a long staff, and on it is roped a stuffed camel. So the guy's holding up, and he goes, what do you think I want? I was like, medication? I don't know. There will be at least one more Camel Club book, and I'm thinking about it now. It's probably going to be a couple of years down the road. My problem has been to think up a plot that really justifies bringing them back, because they are a very unusual group. And so a story that I might have for Will Robie or King and Maxwell or John Puller doesn't fit these guys. It's just, and I also, since it's such an ensemble cast, if you will, I have to justify a story that will allow me to showcase each of them too. I don't want to bring it back and have the whole thing be about Oliver Stone and forget about the rest of them, or Annabelle. And so it's been difficult, but I'm going to make it happen. Okay. I promise. Anybody else have a question? Yes, please. Yeah, I can hear you.
Can you just repeat
I sure can, yes. The question is, where do I write? Wherever I happen to be breathing at any point in time. I sort of tease some of my writer friends, so they get up at 6:07 every day, and they go down and they have an orange juice with one ice cube, and they have a special sweater that they wear, and they have a desk that was built in 1842, and it's set at a place where it's a 45-degree angle, sunlight coming in through the window, and they have a special pen that belonged to Lafayette or someone like that. And they write for 3 hours and 17 minutes every day. And they turn out 5 pages of prose, or 2,312 words every day. And then once that 2,312th word has been written, they get up and go play golf, which is what they really wanted to do. So for me, my days are typical for being atypical. I tend to write every day, and my method is I write until my tank is empty on whatever I'm writing for that day. So I could write 10 words, I could write 1,500 words. I don't count the words. I don't count the pages, because that seems meaningless to me. If my goal is to write 2,000 words a day, okay, I'll write 2,000 words. What if they're all crap? But that next one is brilliant. Am I really going to stop because I've hit my goal of 2,000 words a day? So I write until my tank is empty, and I work on multiple projects. So if I'm done with one project, I'm really good about compartmentalizing. So that project is out of my mind. I move on to the next one, and I focus on that, and I work on it until my tank is empty. And then I just sort of keep going. I write in planes, trains, automobiles, hotels, by the pool. I've written with, a screaming baby on one leg while I'm doing one of these with the baby holding it, typing with one hand, and I'm telling my son, I swear to God, one more paragraph and I'll feed you. And therapy has been wonderful for him. He's 19 now, and I think he's finally seeing some light at the end of the tunnel on that trauma. So really, that's just the way I work. It's all for me not about the quantity, but actually what the quality of the output is. Have I accomplished what I wanted to say that day on the pages? And again, wherever I happen to be, I've been on film sets where I'm sitting in a corner writing on a novel until they need me to write something for the film. So it really is, if I'm in the zone, I'm in the zone, and nobody else is. I'm oblivious to everything else. My poor wife, since holiday season is coming up, my wife is polishing her skills about people saying, "What's wrong with David? He's over there and he looks like he's in a coma." And she looks over, she goes, "Just finishing up a chapter, 5 minutes, he'll be back. Don't worry." So that's sort of me, you just kind of get lost in it, which I love. Because for me to get lost in the story in my head means that I can produce a story on paper that all of you can get lost in, which is nice. Yes, sir.
The last thing I had heard on Amazon was that they were actually opening a store, physical store in Washington. Have you done graphic novels, and what do you think of the media?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, you're right. Amazon, I think they opened a store in Seattle, Washington, bricks and mortar. Graphic novels, I have not done those. I've done kids' books that have been illustrated. I think graphic novels are great. And a lot of kids, actually, those are entry points for readers who may not be ready for a novel. There are a lot of gatekeepers out there in graphic novels. I'm all for anything that will get young people to sit down and open a page of something, whether it's pictures and words or eventually words. And as far as like ebooks or audio, people ask me, "John, do you think are ebooks going to destroy the industry?" No, they're not. They've actually, I think, helped the industry. We have to go where readers are, and where readers are, what I write, you can listen to, you can read it on an ebook, you can read on a hardcover, you can download on an MP3 player, you can read as a paperback. It really doesn't matter, but the important thing is that you're reading. And we've seen, my experience has been, and I think most publishers will say the same thing, is ebook sales are finally plateaued. I don't know for how long they're going to be, but they have. And the print sales are up again across the board for me, and I know for other writers that I know, both hardcover and softcover. So I think the pendulum swings back and forth. The important thing is to go to where readers are. And a lot of young readers have matriculated to graphic novels, but I also know from personal experience that a lot of those people have now gone on to traditional novels and other books, that they're become readers. You make a reader early, you make a reader for life, I think. And if you don't, you won't. So I think the more people we can capture early on, it's important, and graphic novels are a way to do that. Yes, ma'am.
First time I saw Jaws, I didn't use the bathroom the rest of the night. I was afraid the shark was going to come out of the toilet. But my question, because my aunt is the real Baldacci fan in our family, so I apologize if this was already asked, but I asked her if she had a question, and she said, his Washington series, any new books coming? And I don't know if that's the same thing as the Camel Club, because she is the slowest writer.
No, it's, if it is the Camel Club, you can tell her another one is coming. A lot of my other series are based in Washington, so if she likes Washington series, yes, she's got a lot of stuff she's going to be able to read from me, but she's probably referring to the Camel Club. Okay. I had one person who wrote in on Facebook or Twitter or one of those things. Social media, I really think is going to catch on. And you heard it here. If it does happen, I was the first one to tell you guys. I think it has some potential. So, but somebody wrote and said, yeah, I like this last book, but can you get back to the homeless guy in D.C. and write more about him, which is Oliver Stone. I mean, I guess he is a homeless guy, although he's got a little shack he lives in. So yes, she's good. Anybody else have any questions? Oh, yes.
I was wondering, I know you were explaining how your typical day is not so typical, but do you work on different projects simultaneously and say, today I feel like working on The Guilty and tomorrow I feel like working on another book that you're working on, or do you just focus on one until it's done?
It's a great question. Do I work on multiple projects? My wife will tell you that I can't multitask to save my life, but in that endeavor, I can multitask. I'll give you an example of something that happened 3 weeks ago. I was working on the new Amos Decker in the morning. I was revising the television treatment for the television series that I created in the early afternoon. And then after that, I started working on the young adult, the third installment of the Vega Jane series. That'll be out in about a year. So I worked on 3 different projects at the same time. I never work on 2 thrillers at the same time. That for me gets a little hinky. So I don't want to cross the streams and put stuff into one book and leave it out of the other. So I don't do that. But if they're different projects, if they're television or a screenplay for a film or a young adult or an adult book, I can easily write and work on, simultaneous ones during the course of a day. And that's why I said before, I write until my tank is empty. So I like it that I have multiple projects going. Another thing, I get writing assignments all the time, and I can accept them or not. One was Signet Classic Library Series. They're bringing out another Mark Twain novel next year, Pudd'nhead Wilson, which actually is one of my favorite novels that he's written. And they asked me to do the afterword for it. So I sat down, took a week or so, and worked on an afterword for that I just found terrific, and inspiring for me, because I was able to tie it to some of my own personal experiences and also current events going on in the world today. And that's the other thing. I'm a voracious reader, not just of fiction, but of what's going on in the world. I'll read 7 or 8 newspapers a day, plus magazines, plus going online. Huffington Post is I go right down the Huffington Post and read pretty much everything they write every day. Daily Beast and all the others, and because I want to know what's going on, because I can then take a lot of the stuff that's actually happening in the real world and fictionalize it, because I want to be plausible. I want to know what's going on in the world, and I can take those events, bend them to my own creative will, and then turn them into stories. So curiosity is an attribute that I think every successful writer has to have. You have to be curious about what's going on around you. Even if you don't write mysteries or thrillers, even if you're writing more literary fiction, you have to know, the pulse of the world you're actually writing about. And one way to do that is just to explore it all the time. Yes, sir.
In the Escape, I was a little surprised at the ending. We won't divulge that.
No, we won't.
No, but my question is, when you're writing a story, do you know how the book story is going to end?
When I'm writing the novel, do I know how the book is going to end? Never in all 35 novels that I've written have I ever known how the book's going to end until I sort of get to the end. And I sort of like that. Otherwise, to sort of paraphrase Truman Capote, if you write from an outline that's telling you exactly everything's supposed to be in the book that you thought of months before you actually sat down to write the book, then you're not really writing a novel. You're just sort of typing until you get to the end. So for me, it's an exploration, it's a journey, it's a series of revelations and epiphanies, getting up one day and thinking I'm going to write a certain scene one way, and all of a sudden, wham, I'm living this book so much, I just thought of something else that is so cool that I know it's going to end up in the book. I wouldn't have been able to think of it months before on an outline, because when I was writing the outline, I had not written the first page of the book. So how in the world how could I write an outline for a character like Amos Decker when I had spent no time with him on the page, Okay, he's supposed to do this, 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 and this. Okay, great. I've got an outline. I spent 3 months writing it, and the outline's 200 pages long. So first day, I sit down to write. I look at the outline. What am I supposed to write today? Okay, he does that. All right. And I'm writing, and I'm like, that just doesn't work at all. I mean, yeah, it sounded really good over there, but it's almost like taking a concept car that you designed on paper and then building it and realizing it just doesn't work. The way I thought it looked beautiful over here, there's no way anybody in the world would ever want to get in this car and drive it around, because it just doesn't work. So for me, it's an exploration. I feel like if I surprise myself while I'm writing the novel, I'm going to stun all of you when you're reading it, because at least I have some basis for knowing where the story is going while you don't. So I love those revelations along the way and epiphanies, because epiphanies are really, it's not like you just thought of it. You've been immersed yourself in this world, and epiphanies are just things that have been there percolating for a long time. Your brain has been turning it over every way it possibly can, and all of a sudden it pops the answer up to the surface, and you think, oh, I just thought of it. No, you've been thinking about that for a really long time. Your brain is now just finished finessing this point, and now you call it an epiphany, where it's actually not really an epiphany. Anybody else?
You miss being a lawyer?
Do I miss being a lawyer? Thank you for the softball. How do I traditionally answer this question? I miss some of the people I worked with. Some, not all. And I miss some of the clients that I worked with as well. But in all honesty, writing is always what I've wanted to do in my life. And it's great to be sort of the boss of your own career, and to do what you want to do. I enjoy practicing law. It was exhilarating. It was challenging. I was mostly a trial lawyer. I cut my teeth in the rocket docket in Alexandria, Virginia Federal Court. My first trial I had over there, back then, it's now the bankruptcy court. They built a brand new courthouse in Alexandria, but the old courthouse is on Washington Street. So here I am, a young lawyer. I'm like 26. I'm walking up with my briefcase. I'm scared to death. It's my first time. And you walk in, and the sign over the federal courthouse is the Albert V. Bryan Jr. Federal Courthouse, which is kind of intimidating. Okay, so you walk in, and I go down to my courtroom, and on the wall is a portrait of Albert V. Bryan Jr., the guy who the building is named after. This white-haired, balding, kind of, judge-looking guy. And so then I sit down and getting my papers, and out from the back, all rise, everybody gets up, and out from the back comes this judge. White-haired, small, balding, looks like a judge. Well, this is Albert V. Bryan III, his son. And he was a fantastic judge. I think he might have passed by now, but he was and when he was up on the bench, he always would be like leaning to the side and looked like his eyes were closed. First time I saw this happen, I thought the guy had had a stroke. I looked up, he was leaning to the side and his eyes were closed, and it looked like he was kind of drooling a little bit. I was like, oh my God. He's had it. But the judge, a lawyer from the other side, says something, and he popped up and he like nailed the guy. And judge and lawyers who had practiced before him finally told me, he goes, he has a legal pad down there. and he's writing down everything that everybody's saying. And woe be to you if you make an inconsistent statement, because he will like tear you apart. And he did several times during the course of my career, probably during the course of that one day while I was there. But so that was challenging and exhilarating, and I think that experience, really helped me some in the creative process and the discipline, because I worked on big projects for long periods of time. I worked on cases that lasted years. That's just all I knew. So writing a novel that took me 2 or 3 years didn't matter to me. That's what I'd spent my time doing anyway. But on the business side of it, it really helped, because my publishers really lament the fact that I read and understand all the publishing contracts. And I have helped a lot of writers along the way, because I have rewritten, a lot of those contracts to make them far more fair to writers, because trust me, they weren't at all. And I did a Writer's Digest article. I had like 10 tips or whatever for young writers, and one of them was that no publisher should ever make more money off of a book than the author. And I'll tell you, with standard publishing contracts, it doesn't even come close to that happening. Publishers make far more money off of every single book than the author does. So I never thought that was fair. So being a lawyer and being able to negotiate some of these things and knowing how to bargain and go back and forth was really a great tool for me too. So that was a really long way of answering a very short question of yours that, no, I don't miss being a lawyer. Any other questions? Okay. Absolutely, I'd be glad to. I had the editor that I have now. Well, I'll explain. We've done probably 14 or 15 books together. Great friend of mine. We've had a great rapport that we've built up over the years. He actually just left, but he went to join the agency that represents me. He's gone to the agency side, so I'm still going to have a great relationship with him there. I just got an editorial letter down from him 4 days ago on the latest Amos Decker book. A good editor understands how his writers work. And for me, I need them to tell me, one, what they think is weak with the book and the story. I don't need them to tell me what's great about it. I sort of instinctively kind of know where the strong points in the story are, and I also sort of instinctively know where the weak points are, where I need to get something else accomplished. So their job is not to tell me how to rewrite something. Their job is to tell me how they're feeling about something. I don't really get this character at this point in the story. This plot point doesn't really make a whole lot of sense to me. So these are broad brushstrokes that they'll give you with no solution at all, and it's your job to sort of go and work through that. And I have to tell you, so many times a comment that my editor has given me about one section of the book has prompted me to think about an entirely different section of the book that he didn't think of just because he didn't write the book. It's my job sort of to do all of that, the comprehensive thinking, and to change something over here that made the whole novel plus the point he had far better. And we have that give and take. I tell aspiring writers and young writers that no word you ever write is set in stone. You need to listen to the other people who are trying to make what you're doing even better. They're not writing the book for you, but they're giving you comments and notes and opinions so that you can go back and think about things. It's their perspective. So don't discount it right off the bat that, I've written this and I'm not changing it. That's wrong. You need to respect and value other people's opinions who are professionals in their own field, and they all have the same goal of trying to make the end result better. So I've always approached the editorial relationship in that way with a great deal of respect. I'm a good listener. I may not agree, and I don't agree all the time with comments that my editors have had, but I always listen and try to understand what they're trying to say and trying to use what they have given me in order to make the whole book a better experience and make it more right in my mind what I set out to do in the first place. Yes.
Question regarding character development. I can imagine that your mind is always going, especially when you meet people, scanning sizes, shapes of faces, and so forth. Do you, at times when you're walking down the block, say, that person right there might be good for a future book, and then flesh them out later? Or do you just have all these ideas of characters and file them, wait for later? How do you develop your characters for books?
Well, several people here are going to be in future books. It's sort of it's an amalgam of that. I've never taken somebody I've met in real life and plopped them whole cloth into a book. Just really doesn't work. But again, the curiosity factor that you need, I love meeting people. I love seeing how people talk. I love seeing how people, the physical tics they might have, how they walk across the room, just how they carry themselves. I remember stuff like that. I remember, unusual physical characteristics as well. So I might have met someone 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago that I recall something unusual about them that struck me as being interesting. And that attribute might end up on some character in a novel down the road. So it's all sort of fair game. And so when I love being the wallflower watching everybody else. I would much prefer to not be up here speaking, even though I enjoy that, but I'd like to be back there kind of watching everybody else, because that's really what writers do. We watch and we listen. And you'd be amazed at how much good stuff is out there if you look at the world in the right way. I mean, writers have this prism they have to cock all the time, and it's done sort of naturally for me. Is I see exactly what everybody sees out there. We're in a bookstore and people are sitting in chairs and there's some activity going back there and cars are going down Connecticut and all the normal things. But if you cock your prism and you wonder, what else can I add to this that would make it more interesting than what I'm actually just seeing? So what factors can I bring to bear on this of what I'm seeing to make it turn the ordinary into the extraordinary? And that's sort of always what I'm reaching for, because I like to build my books on a plausibility factor, but then from there I can do anything I want to do. People ask me, do you find it harder to write novels these days? And I said, well, in some ways it's easier, because if I'm bound by plausibility, it's almost like anything is plausible anymore. I had a magazine interview and somebody asked me, people that I admired, people I liked, and one of the questions was unusual. It said, do you have anybody you dislike? And I said, certainly I do, and most of them are running for president right now. So what is plausible today, I just turn on the TV or the radio or look at a paper and someone has said this, and I'm like, my God. So, I can write about anything and people can't tell me it's not plausible because I just saw it on TV yesterday. Take a couple more questions and then we'll go.
Yeah, I'm reflecting back on your comments about taking a book and your manuscript and transitioning it for screenplay or screenwriting.
Yeah.
And so I'm wondering, how do you, as a writer, a prolific writer, keep your fidelity to the book that you've written to get the same story in the medium of film? Because oftentimes I see people that are avid readers very disappointed. So how do you manage that tension and how do you manage expectations?
That's a great question. I don't think anyone's ever asked me that question with the depth you just did, I want to give you a really good answer to that. In the beginning, you have really high aspirations and goals and how you want to make sure that you translate it over, as well as you possibly can. And then you very quickly run into the harsh realities of the world you're dealing with. And when I was talking about the editorial relationship on the novel side, at the end of the day, in the publishing world, the writer is the king or queen. We get the last call. So if we don't want to do something, we don't do it. That is not the way it works on the film side. So it is by default a collaborative affair. And the writer does not have the last call on it by any stretch of the imagination. What I try to do when I'm adapting is I look at the core of the story. Okay, and I sort of wipe out of my mind, at least for the moment, the subplots and peripheral characters and all that to make a book great as a book. But I'm dealing with the physical parameters of a film that has to come in at maybe 100 minutes or 110 minutes. And you can say, I don't want to think about that, but the problem is you have to think about that. Because if you turn in a script that's going to run 180 minutes and it's sort of, a drama, people will watch a movie that's 3 hours long, but you have to have two very critical elements. You have to have a very young, beautiful couple falling in love. And secondly, you have to have an enormous ship sinking for a really long time. Only if you have those two elements, people will watch it. Otherwise, it's going to be about 110 or 120 minutes, and that's it. So to take a 400-page novel, it's just, you know that you have to stick to the core. And then you group core characters. And then you plot out for yourself, what's the narrative of this story that I want to tell? And sometimes it might be a slice of the book, if it's a particularly long book with multiple plots. What is the essence of the story that I want to tell? And I'll give an example for Absolute Power. My first novel was turned into a film. Bill Goldman is a brilliant screenwriter. He's won 2 Academy Awards. He wrote in one of his books on the screen trade that he wrote a whole chapter on Absolute Power. Said it was the hardest adaptation he'd ever done in his whole life. The book was 500 pages. There were a lot of plots and subplots running through, a plethora of characters, and a lot of different directions going on at the same time. Because I'm really good. Now, anyway, his dilemma was that he had written a draft of the script before Clint Eastwood signed on. So the young lawyer hero that was in the book was in that draft of the script. Clint Eastwood's character, the burglar, in that draft of the script died halfway through, just like in the book. And then Clint Eastwood signed on to direct, star, and produce, and Clint was the man. So Bill Goldman, legendary screenwriter, his marching orders were, Clint doesn't die. And we don't need the young hero, because Clint doesn't die. So Bill had to go back and tear the entire book apart. So the 3 acts of it, movies are 3 acts. And the only act of the book really that ended up in the movie was the first act, which is him burglarizing and getting away and all that, which was an awesome first act. I mean, not just because it was from the book, but mostly because it was from the book. And then the second and third acts had to be entirely different because of that. So that's why I say that the writer doesn't have the call, and the parameters are what the parameters are. But at the end of the day, and look, I've been through this multiple times. At the end of the day, the minute count matters a lot more. And your first day out, you're like, oh, who cares about the minute count? The minute count is critical. And if you come in long, boy, are you going to hear about it from all sectors. And it's not going to be a pleasant time for you. But so core story, core characters, pick the narrative of the story that you want to tell, and just stick to that like you wouldn't believe, and then you're going to have, the important elements of the book there, and hopefully people will enjoy it.
David, I wanted to come back to this idea of fictionalizing current events and ask you about the Islamic State. Do you look at that, twisted, nefarious group and see at this point already potential for future novels, or is the group still too raw, too fresh, and too much of a developing story for you?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think back to the movie W, Oliver Stone, great director. And I went to see the movie. And a lot of, I think where that movie failed was there was not enough time between actual George W. Bush being in the White House and the movie coming out. People were not ready for that. When you're talking about a group like ISIS or ISIL, however you want to refer to them, those wounds literally are fresh and deep. And you would have to take that project on knowing, one, what you wanted to do with it, because it could really end up being very much a caricature of a story. Bad guys, good guys, which I don't really like to write those stories. I like to write about bad people who sometimes do good things, good people who sometimes do bad things to try to get a good result, gray, flawed, all of that. That's my sweet spot. It would be, and I've attempted this. In my first Camel Club novel, the book dealt with the Muslim world in quite a number of degrees. And in that book I had, as I sort of call them, sort of various categories. Some would be, one character was like someone in ISIL, a jihadist who only wanted to kill and destroy. But I had other Muslim characters there who were far different from that, and had a far different goal in life and a far more positive outlook. And, they were flawed as well, but so were the people battling them. They were flawed too, and they were doing things sometimes for the wrong reasons. You have to be prepared when you take on something that fresh in the public's eye that you're going to get hammered regardless of how you do it. And I can't tell you the vitriol that I received after the first Camel Club, death threats, nasty emails, letters with white powder in them delivered to my office, and people calling me every, name in the book. And most of them were, American citizens who just thought I'd gone off the deep end, because they didn't want to be presented a complicated tale. They wanted black and white good and evil, and good destroys evil. So a book like that, I don't know how I would approach it actually in trying to fit it into the parameters of the sorts of stories that I like to tell. Because I think if I did, I'm not sure I'd be here next year to come and talk to you people. Somebody might have taken me out along the way. But that would be my biggest dilemma, I think, if that answers your question.
It does.
Okay, anybody else? Everybody good? Okay, have a great holiday. Thanks for coming.
Okay, remember that this box...